In the year 875, Saint Adon, the Archbishop of Vienne in Gaul.
Historical Eulogy of Saint Adon.
Many scholars know Adon, Archbishop of Vienne, not just for his rank but also for his writings. However, as far as I know, no one has yet explained who he was or what kind of person he was before becoming a bishop. Some may be surprised that I include him in the Benedictine family, since Trithemius, Lyon, Menard, Bucellan, and others did not list him in our records, but they will stop being surprised when I explain my reasoning. I found a summary of Adon's life in the Breviary of the Collegiate Church of Romans in the Dauphine region, where Adon's memory is celebrated. This breviary, published in 1612, recounts the acts of the saints word for word from the works of ancient authors who wrote about them. This includes Adon, whose feast day is noted in the breviary as December 16, Saint Adon, Bishop and Confessor. It says to use the common readings except for the legend, and below, the life of Saint Adon, Archbishop of Vienne begins. These words suggest that the summary of his life, which I will soon present from the breviary, was excerpted from the writings of an ancient author who recorded Saint Adon's deeds long ago. Additionally, the Church of Vienne, in its breviary published 120 years ago, uses almost the same words as the Romans breviary up to Adon's election as archbishop. From that point, it provides a different account of the deeds performed by Adon after he became a bishop. This Vienne breviary, a copy of which was kindly sent to us by the very courteous Dr. Peter Louvet, a physician and historian of dooms, offers a different narrative. It is useful to present here the readings from both breviaries for comparison. From the Breviary of Vienne? During the reign of King Charles, who ruled France after his father Emperor Louis, a noble child was given to the Ferrières monastery by his parents while he was still very young. Later, he visited the renowned house of St. Peter, the chief of the apostles, and other sacred places in Rome for prayer, with God as his companion. He stayed there for almost 5 years. On his return journey, he reached Ravenna, where he stayed for a while and transcribed a small book lent to him by a religious brother, which greatly helped him in describing the sufferings of the holy martyrs. From there, he traveled to the renowned city of Lyon. At that time, the distinguished Bishop Remigius, who was very dear to the kings, was in charge. He kindly received the servant of God, Adon, in the guise of a poor man, and provided him with what he needed. Through their conversations, Remigius, a man of prudent mind, recognized Adon's notable qualities of knowledge and virtue, and tried with all his effort to keep him with him. Remigius then sent a petition to Adon's abbot, and obtained permission to retain him for his and his church's service for as long as he deemed useful. After some time, upon learning of the death of the Bishop of Vienne, Remigius decided to pursue the matter diligently so that Adon might be ordained as the Bishop of the Church of Vienne. With the consent of both the clergy and the people, and with the advice and presence of the neighboring bishops, Adon was consecrated as the Bishop of Vienne. Unlike many who, upon receiving such a position of honor, become prideful, he remained humble and constantly urged all his subordinates to follow the truth in their own way, saying, "Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." Whose beneficial and holy devotion, upon entering the Holy Mother Church built in honor of the Savior, created a small house resembling the tomb of the Lord. At the entrance, he consecrated an altar, carved out of stones, in honor of Mary the sinner, Peter the denier, and the thief who confessed. When many sick people come there, through their intercession, they often return home happily healed. His care and diligence towards hospitality and mercy for the poor are well known, as the door of his house was never closed, not even during meals. Thus he could rightly say with blessed Job, "My door was open to the traveler, and I was a father to the poor." Though a tireless worker, even if he was busy with good works during the day, he didn't believe he should give himself entirely to sleep at night, as if exhausted by daytime work. To satisfy nature, he allowed himself a little rest and dedicated the remaining night to prayer, compelling the brothers to rise early for night vigils. He was usually present, prolonging the readings and responses until, as daylight approached, the morning praises were performed. When the time came for the Lord, King of Kings, to grant his soldier rest from his labor, after completing about 16 years in the bishopric, he departed from this life to the next with a happy end. His body, carried by the clergy and all the people according to custom, was buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles, among his predecessor bishops. From the Roman Breviary? During the time of King Charles, who ruled France after his father, Emperor Louis, this holy man, born of noble lineage, was given to the monastery called Ferrières by his parents when he was still a little boy. While living under strict monastic discipline, which was especially stringent in that monastery at the time, he was divinely inspired and chosen, surpassing all his peers in literary studies. Avoiding the mischief and other childish behaviors typical of his age, he eagerly sought to follow the serious conduct of the elderly and the perfected. Motivated by youthful strength and burning with an unquenchable desire, he wished to visit the house of St. Peter, the chief of the apostles, and other holy sites in and around the city of Rome for prayer. Therefore, he took on the habit of a pilgrim and set out on his desired journey. Entering the apostolic house humbly in appearance and devout in heart, he frequently rejoiced in staying awake in continuous prayer, keeping vigil through the night until morning light. Indeed, since he was almost universally known in the city of Rome, after nearly 5 years, he reached Ravenna, where he transcribed a book lent by a certain religious man, describing the passions of the holy martyrs. From there, he arrived in Lyon. At that time, the esteemed and distinguished Remigius, greatly favored by kings, was in charge. Remigius kindly received God's servant, Adu, and treated him with great hospitality. Recognizing Adu's signs of knowledge and virtue, he entrusted him with the church of St. Romanus and its associated properties so that he could devote himself more privately to prayer. After learning of the death of the Bishop of Vienne, the members of that church, moved by divine inspiration, unanimously requested Lord Adu be appointed as their bishop. Accordingly, with the consent of both the clergy and the people, and with the advice of the provincial bishops, that servant of God was consecrated as the Bishop of Vienne. Seeing that the practice of religion was partly neglected due to various adverse causes, he endeavored in every way to gradually reform it back to its original standard through his own efforts. Numerous documents of his teachings attest to this. Indeed, he beautifully established the rule for singing the night and day offices. Moreover, how diligently he worked on restoring or decorating church buildings. Even if human testimony is lacking, the same buildings still stand as evidence. The care and dedication he showed towards hospitality for the poor need not be written about, especially since the door to his house was not closed. I won't say to anyone else, but not even during mealtimes. And when the time came for the Lord to reward his soldier with a blessed reward, having served as bishop for about 16 years, he departed from this life to the next with a happy end. His body was very respectfully buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles. He lived around 76 years. When I first read these things in the Roman Breviary, since I received the Viennese example much later, I was filled with great joy that I had some material to illustrate such a great man. But my pleasure was tempered by the fact that I lacked ancient and suitable monuments to prove these things. While thinking about this and rereading the letters of Abbot Lupus of Ferrières, his 122nd letter came to my attention, which satisfies my wishes. For in this letter, which is addressed to Gerard, Duke or Count of the province, and to his wife Berta, I found certain details that perfectly match the actions of Adu as previously described. And since this matter is of no small importance, it is worth bringing the entire letter here, so that no one will doubt my credibility. To the most excellent Duke Gerard and his distinguished wife Berta, Lupus sends present and future greetings. Your reputation for integrity has always brought joy to good people everywhere. Now it has flourished even more widely, as God has confirmed that this same integrity of yours will benefit all Christians in the future. Since you have generously granted what you first promised and then committed to, we will strive to express our gratitude. Moreover, regarding your careful inquiries, you should know that my monk and disciple Ad never fled from our monastery. Instead, at the request of the blessed memory of Abbot Markward from Prum Abbey, we sent him honorably, and he stayed with him for some time to avoid the traps of some envious people. From there, out of a desire to learn and love for peace, he settled in the city of Lyon. However, upon the urgent request and praise of his conduct by the very venerable men Remigius and H. of Grenoble, although he had already received my permission verbally, he also received regular letters. These letters, when presented, will faithfully convey my opinion of him. I am absolutely certain that he also has ecclesiastical letters from our venerable Bishop Genelon, and nothing prevents him from being justly elected if God calls him. He behaved well among us. He is suitable to teach, which the Church greatly needs. He is supported by regular and episcopal letters. He is adorned by the nobility of his ancestors. He remains devout in his holy purpose, according to the judgment of the aforementioned bishops among whom he resides. What remains except that what God has inspired in the holy bishops should come to pass? Is it surprising if I once spoke harshly about him? That was due to the fault of his enemies who shamelessly spread falsehoods about him. What I now write is my consistent judgment based on first-hand observations and subsequent findings. I wish you happiness and good health. From this letter by Lupus, we learn about a noble and educated monk from Ferrara, whose name started with the letters Ad. He lived in the province of Lyon, was approved by bishops Remigius and Hebo, and was elected to episcopal dignity. All these details align with the breviaries of Vienna and Rome, and no one other than Adu can legitimately fit this description. These points will be explained more distinctly in parts. But before I proceed, it's appropriate to remind the reader of how much the public literary domain owes to Stephen Ballouz in the new edition of the works of Abbot Lupus. He achieved this with the correction of a single word, indeed, just the correction of 2 letters, to shed light on the memory of our Adu. Whereas in the Masonian edition it previously read my monk, he restored it through the collation of old manuscripts, my monk Ad. Although, as he modestly admits, he could not guess who this man, expressed by these 2 letters Ad, was. Now I proceed to the order of events performed by Adu. When Adon is said to have arisen during the time of King Charles, surnamed the Bald, interpret it as I have frequently explained similar passages, that he became renowned at that time. It is certain that he was born during the reign of Charlemagne around the year 800. Indeed, he died at the age of 76, in the year of Christ 875, as we will see later. In both breviaries, he is said to have arisen from a noble lineage, adorned with the nobility of his ancestors according to Lupus. I conjecture that his homeland was the Wastenense or Signonic region. When he was still an infant, he was entrusted by his parents to the monastery called Ferrara, in the manner prescribed in the rule of Saint Benedict regarding the offering and acceptance of children, chapter 59. From this I infer that Adon was born in a place near the Ferrara monastery, which was previously mentioned in the life of Saint Aldric, Archbishop of Senators. That boy seems to have been taken in by Abbot Seagulf, where he behaved well, according to Lupus, surpassing all his peers in the study of literature, as noted by the Roman Breviary. Lupus provides testimony of his learning, writing that he was suitable to teach what the Church greatly needed. After spending some time in the Ferriers monastery, at the request of Abbot Markward from Prum, who was in charge from 829 to 853, he was honorably sent to Prum. Ausonius praises a stream in his Moselle, which flows past this place, hence the monastery was sometimes called Pronia, commonly known as Prum, with a slight change in the name. However, I prefer to read it as being sent to Prum at the request of Abbot Markward, to indicate the location of Prum near the Pronia stream. Between the two monasteries, Ferriers and Prum, the monks had easy communication back and forth, partly because Markward was taken from the Ferriers monastery, and partly because he was closely connected with Lupus. Indeed, monks from Ferriers were sent to Prum to learn the German language, which Lupus confirms was very necessary at that time in letters 70 and 91. Even though monasteries were not connected by any common rule of governance, they were still easily accessible to monks traveling back and forth, due to the unity of their religion. As Markward mentioned in Lupus's letter 72 to Didon, the abbot of the monastery of St. Peter in Sens, who was very skilled in the medical arts and to whom he sent his monks for healing. Thus, Lupus states in letter 116 to the Set, monks of the Saint Germain monastery in Auxerre, true charity has always thrived among the inhabitants of our monasteries, but never with such clear signs as in our time has it demonstrated its greatness. After staying for some time in Prum, Adon, as Lupus records, was later attacked by the plots of some envious people. To avoid these, he went to Rome to visit the house of St. Peter, the chief of the apostles, for the sake of prayer. This journey isn't mentioned by Lupus, who, as he admits, listened too credulously to the rivals of Adonis. Lupus recounts the other Roman pilgrimages of his monks in letters 101, 102 and 103 for Aldolf and Echeric, then 106 and 107 for Delivold, written in the name of both himself and Ganelon, Archbishop of Sens, in commendation of these pilgrims. After spending nearly 5 years in Rome, the holy man arrived in Ravenna. There, he transcribed a booklet lent by a religious brother that described the passions of the holy martyrs, known as a martyrology, which we will revisit later. This booklet is an old martyrology, which Adon used in composing his own, edited by Rosewide. Prefixed to it is Adon's letter, attesting to how much he benefited from that old martyrology. He states that this work, the Adonian Martyrology, was helped by the venerable and very old martyrology, sent from Rome to Aquileia to a holy bishop by the Roman pontiff. It was later lent to him for a few days by a religious brother, which he transcribed with diligent care while in Ravenna, and thought it should be placed at the beginning of his work. This is what Adon says in the preface to his Martyrology, from which the previous words of the Vienne Breviary are derived. After leaving Ravenna, Adon arrived in Lyon, where the distinguished and memorable Bishop Remigius was presiding. He kindly received the servant of God, Adon, and generously provided him with what he needed. When he fully understood, through mutual conversation, the remarkable signs of knowledge and virtue hidden in Adon, he made every effort to retain him. After making a supplicatory mission to his abbot, he obtained permission letters to keep him in his service and that of his church, as long as he deemed it useful. Lupus agrees with the Vienne Breviary in this matter, testifying that Adon remained in the city of Lyon out of a love for learning and peace. To the most reverend men Remigius and Hebo of Gratianopolis, who earnestly requested and praised the conduct of the mentioned brother. Although he had once received my permission, he had also received formal letters, called letters of obedience, and ecclesiastical or dimissori letters from the venerable Bishop Ganelon of Senators. Indeed, at that time the studies of letters in Lyon were thriving, as proven by the learned men, Lydratus, Agabardus, Amulo, Remigius, bishops of that church, and the deacon Florus. The Roman Breviary adds that Remigius assigned the church of St. Romanus and its adjacent properties to Adon, where he could more privately devote himself to prayer. Which church this was, I cannot say for certain. Perhaps it was the church of St. Romanus, located in the eastern part of the city of Vienne. As Adon himself testifies in the Martyrology on November 19, where he writes that the bodies of the saints Severinus, Exuperius, and Felix were transferred to that church. In the little book about the life of St. Theuderius the abbot, he mentions the Basilica of St. Romanus the Martyr in the suburb of the city, in the village of Berniacus. This basilica still stands, entrusted to the Knights of the Order of Malta. After the death of the Bishop of Vienne was discovered, the sons of that church, inspired by divine guidance, altogether with one mind and will, requested Lord Adu to be appointed as their bishop. Therefore, with the consent of both the clergy and the people, and with the advice of the bishops of the province, the servant of God was consecrated as the Bishop of Vienne. However, some resisted this election. Among them was Gerard, a count of those parts, who believed Adu had fled from his monastery. This is taught to us by a previous letter from Lupus, in which he absolves him from all taint of defection and infamy, asserting that nothing should hinder him if God called him, and thus his election could not justly be undermined. This happened after the death of Agilmar, Bishop of Vienne, the successor of St. Bernard. This election took place in the year 860, as evidenced by the acts of the Council of Langres around the beginning of July the previous year, in which Agilmar participated, and from the Council of Tausi, which Adu signed on October 22, 860. Additionally, from the Synod of Vienne, mentioned below, which Adu held in 870, in the third indiction, in the 10th year of his episcopate. Therefore, it should be noted that Agilmar, his predecessor, served for 19 years, not just 9 years, as John of Bosco claimed. It has been shown that Barnard, Agilmar's predecessor, died in 842. Indeed, Agilmar passed away on July 6, 860, as recorded in Volume 1 of the Analecta, page 103. In his place, Remigius of the Holy Church of Lyon and Ebo, the Bishop of Grenoble, along with the clergy and people, elected Saint Adu. In John of Bosco's appendix to the Library of Fleury, there is a letter from Pope Nicholas I to Adu, sent with the pallium at the beginning of his pontificate. In this letter, he expresses his sadness that in the letters of faith profession sent to the Pope, Adu recognized only 4 general synods, omitting the 5th and 6th. He asked Adu to explain his position on this matter. Meanwhile, he was sending the pallium and the chapters of the Roman Synod which he had recently held. He also sent another letter soon after to the same, confirming the privileges of the Church of Vienne. Whether Adu accepted the 7th Synod is uncertain. Indeed, in the Chronicle, which he seems to have written after receiving episcopal dignity, he rejects this synod. This was the position of the Gallican Church at that time. In the brief Chronicle of the Bishops of Vienne, written in 1139 by order of Bernan, it is said that Saint Otto received the pallium and the confirmation of privileges from Pope Nicholas in 861, with the decrees of the Lateran, that is, the Roman Council. He was not, like most people, immediately filled with pride upon receiving a position of honor. Instead, he remained humble and constantly urged all his followers to become imitators of the truth in their own way, saying, "Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." Matthew 11:29. These words are read in the Breviary of Vienne. In the year 866, according to the Annals of St. Bertin, King Charles the Bald and King Lothair arranged a joint mission at Atene regarding the matter of Teutberga, Lothair's concubine. Charles sent Eigil, the Archbishop of Sens, and Lothair sent Adu, the Archbishop of Vienne, along with his secretary Walter, to secretly convey their views to Pope Nicholas. Adu did this by writing a letter to Nicholas, whose incomplete response still exists. In it, the Holy Pontiff praises Archbishop Adu as a most holy brother, for he diligently watches over the state of the Holy Church of God, and is zealous in upholding righteousness against the behavior and actions of wrongdoers, lawbreakers, and violators of holy laws. There are also 4 other letters of Nicholas written to Adu in the second appendix of Nicholas' letters in Volume 8 of the Labby edition of the Councils. In the first, the Pontiff responds to Adu's inquiries about the divorce of King Lothair and about the cleric Alvico. In the second, he asserts that the lower churches should not depart from Roman customs. In the third, he explains the reason for the postponed synod, and reproaches Adu for calling the priest Gerard a count, then responds to various inquiries. In the fourth, he confirms the privilege of the metropolis of Vienne. There is also a 5th letter from the librarian Anastasius to Adu regarding the death of Pope Nicholas, which I learned was also sent to other bishops of Gaul from a manuscript of the monastery of St. Marian of Auxerre, where this letter is titled, "To my venerable and much-loved Archbishop, name, many greetings. I bring sad news to you, etc." There is another fragment of a letter addressed to the same person from Pope Nicholas, in which the pontiff reproaches Adu because, under his authority, Subdeacon Alberic had married against the prescribed canons. In Labbe's edition of the Councils, there are also 2 letters from Pope Adrian II. In the first, the pontiff, having been admonished by Adu for deviating from the decrees of Pope Nicholas, excuses himself by praising Adu's zeal. In the second, which is incomplete, he attests that he had received letters from Adu addressed to his predecessor Nicholas. In the year 866, Pope Nicholas, in letters sent to Hincmar, Bishop of Reims, commands that Remigius of Lyon, Adu of Vienne, and Wenilo of Rouen, along with other archbishops and bishops of Gaul and Neustria, convene in the city of Soissons to discuss the case of Wolfad and other clerics of Reims, whom Hincmar had disciplined after they were ordained by Ebo. This synod was convened on the 18th of August. However, Adu did not attend for reasons unknown. Hincmar himself, in his own name and that of Adu and other bishops of Gaul, wrote to Louis, King of Germany, on behalf of Bertulf, Archbishop of Trier, against Walton, a monk of the monastery of St. Maximin, who, as he says, was an intruder of the See of Trier. Likewise, Hincmar wrote to Adu, Archbishop of Vienne, concerning, among other things, a letter written by the Blessed Avitus to Saint Remigius, which a certain monk named Rotfrid had said he had read in Adu's possession. He requested that if Adu could find any other writings about Saint Remigius, he should send them to him, as they were more precious than gold and topaz. Fredord, an author in the History of Reims, Book 3, Chapter 21, also testifies that this Rotfrid was a monk of the monastery of Saint Remigius in Reims. From the Chronicle of Hugh, Abbot of Flavigny, we learn that Remigius, the Archbishop of Lyon, sent letters to Adu, the Bishop of Vienne, who was the vicar, or legate, of the Roman Church. He also wrote to Pope Nicholas about the deposed bishops of Trier and Cologne, namely, Tutgod and Gunthar. Later, both Remigius and Adu wrote to Pope John regarding simony and the issue of unworthy individuals being promoted to the episcopate by secular authorities. In the year 869, after Ebo, the Bishop of Grenoble, passed away, King Lothar received permission from his brother, Emperor Louis II, to grant the bishopric of Grenoble to a cleric named Bernarius. Adu received a letter from Louis on July 14, advising him to ordain Bernarius as bishop as soon as possible. Another letter arrived on August 1 from King Lothar, informing Adu of his successful journey to Rome, and instructing him to meet at St. Maurice upon his return. On August 27, Adu received a letter from King Charles, who called him his dearest, and mentioned granting the bishopric of Grenoble to a cleric who had served both Archbishop Remigius and Lothar. King Charles asked Adu to evaluate the cleric's worthiness and, if found suitable, to ordain him as bishop. These letters are documented in the third volume of the Councils of Gaul by Sermond. Observing that religious practices had partly declined due to difficult circumstances, Adu made every effort to gradually restore them to their former standard of righteousness, as recorded in the Roman Breviary. He also instituted many reforms, including the beautiful establishment of rules for singing the nocturnal and diurnal offices. From the synods held under his authority, one particularly stands out. The learned man Peter Louvet, as previously mentioned, sent it to our Acreus, having transcribed it from the Viennese Charterhouse. It goes as follows. In the year 870 of the Incarnation of our Lord Jesus Christ, a synod was convened in the Metropolitan Church of Vienne, presided over by the Lord and Venerable Archbishop Adu. He diligently investigated ecclesiastical matters and the needs of his flock, defining them according to church customs. The Reverend man Mono, the provost of the monastery of St. Agundus, arrived and explained the reason for his visit. He brought forth a church from the monastery, located within the Vienne diocese in the village of Velnys, endowed in honor of St. Peter. This church had a privilege granted by the predecessors of the now deceased Holy Archbishop, and had been maintained by the same bishop until that time. The rector of the village of St. Alban declared that it was desolate. The venerable provost also presented a document of inquiry made during the time of the Lord Agelmer of pious memory, as there had been a dispute between the rectors of these churches at that time too. However, the Holy Synod judged it invalid, as it was not strengthened by the canons. The holy bishop decided to have the entire matter re-examined from the beginning by the most holy priests, so that once the truth was discovered, the long-standing dispute could be resolved. With these witnesses and the declaration of the truth, it seemed right to the Lord Bishop, with the consent of the most holy synod, that just as the holy congregation of the monastery of the most blessed Agundus had been honored in the days of his holy bishop predecessors, so too in this petition and in its other needs, the Holy Metropolitan Church of Vienne should offer its honor and aid to the best of its ability. To ensure the resolved dispute would firmly secure its privilege in the future, it should also be confirmed by letters. In this way, I, Adu, Archbishop of Vienne, agreeing with the pious advice of my sons, have confirmed this with my own hand below, and have asked my holy sons to confirm it according to ecclesiastical custom, done publicly in Vienne, in April, in the 10th year of my episcopate, in the third indiction. There are also other documents in the same chartarium made during my pontificate. One records the litigation of Whitfrid, advocate of the Church of St. Maurice, who came publicly to Vienne in my presence, along with Erlof, the Viscount sent by Count Boso, co-bishop Constantius, and others, to complain against Sigefrid for violating the church's immunity in its villages. Another document in the same codex is the instrument of Rodstagnus and his wife Bertildes, conveying their property in the field of St. Fariolus. To me in the Church of Vienne they received £5 from the treasury of the church, and a chalice with a paten of refined gold, each weighing 1 pound to Spanish standards. Rodstagnus handed over his property in that village to us, excepting a door, a clod of earth, and a branch. Later he asked me, Constantius the Chorepiscopus, Erlinus the provost, Lutbert the dean, Tutelmus the abbot and deacon and other clerics, to document it on parchment. Done on April 20th, in the 4th year of Lord Charles' reign in the kingdom of his nephew Lothar, in the year of Christ 869. The third document is from me, granting to Amalgo, his wife Wulfolda, and their son Hadrian the usufruct of certain properties, because they donated their properties to the Episcopal Church of St. Stephen. It is helpful to excerpt some fragments from such a priesteria, as they called it. Custom and ecclesiastical justice dictate that those who give their possessions and wealth to God and his servants should receive something reasonable in return from the church. Therefore, I, Adu, Archbishop of the Church of Vienne, along with the priests and clerics of this Holy Mother Church, grant you, Amalgode, your wife Wulfolda, and your son Hadrian, the properties you transferred from your authority and rights to the power of our church through legal documents. For this pious donation, we also grant you, your wife, and your aforementioned son the village of Elysium from our church to manage as long as you live, along with the farms we previously granted to you, together with the churches in the Golden Valley. For the annual vestment, on the feast of the Blessed Maccabees on the 1st of August, you shall provide a meal for the brothers of the Viennese monastery. On that day, the aforementioned church will offer general prayers for you and your relatives, without a time limit. In the letters of Archbishop Ragenfrid of Vienne, at the suggestion of Viscount Barillon, the properties belonging to the Church of St. Peter outside the city walls of Vienne are confirmed. These properties were previously restored by royal decree of the late King Lothair, at the suggestion of the holy bishops Remigius of Lyon and Adu of Vienne. In the year 870, Adu embellished the acts of St. Desiderius, bishop and martyr of Vienne, with a more polished style for the benefit of the people of Vienne. He also sent these acts to the monks of the monastery of St. Gall in Germany, along with some relics of the same saint. More about this and his other writings below. He signed 2 synods in Chalon-sur-Saône, one in the year 873 held in the Church of St. Lawrence, which was restored to the canons of the Church of St. Marcellus. The other in the year 875, in the same Basilica of St. Marcellus, where he signed letters for the Tronzy Monastery, published by Peter Francis Schifflet in the proofs of the history of that monastery. The Vienne Breviary briefly mentions his other deeds, his dedication to adorning churches, his hospitality and charity to the poor, and his devotion to divine offices, as noted in readings 6, 7, and 8 of the same breviary. When the time came for the Lord to reward his soldier, he, having served as bishop for about 16 years, departed this life for the next with a happy end. His body was reverently buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles. Both the Roman Breviary and the Vienne Breviary agree on this. The Roman Breviary adds that he lived for approximately 76 years. I have confirmed that Otan's death occurred in the year 875, because he held the bishopric for 16 years starting from the year 860, and because his successor Ortamnus signed the Council of Pontigan in the year 876. The 16th day of December is marked as his death in the Roman and Gallican breviaries and martyrologies. The year is also designated by a manuscript from Vienne, a copy of which our Claudius Stephanosius received from the learned Nicholas Courier. Here are his words: on the 17th day before the calends of January, Saint Adon of Vienne, a man of remarkable holiness, in the year 875 since the incarnation of the Lord, in the 8th indiction. He governed his church for 16 years and was buried in the Church of the Apostles in Vienne, which is in the extramural basilica of the Monastery of St. Peter, where it was customary for the bishops of Vienne to be buried. The Monastery of St. Peter, once belonging to the order of St. Benedict, was turned over to secular canons, as were many others, as taught by the book on the life of St. Clare, abbot in the 2nd century. From this you can gather that Adu was born around the year 800. He passed away in 875, living approximately 76 years. These details about Saint Adu's deeds, extracted from credible sources like the 122nd letter of Lupus and the breviaries of Vienne and Romans, provided me with the material to shed light on Adu. Andrew Saucius had read the Vienne Breviary and noted in his Gallican Martyrology that Adu spent his early years at the Ferriers Monastery under Abbot Lupus's guidance, a fact that, to my knowledge, no one had mentioned before him. Saint Adu's feast day is celebrated with a double rite in the Church of Vienne and more solemnly in the Church of St. Peter, where his relics are believed to be kept mixed with the bones of other saints and archbishops under the altar, following the plundering of the sacred shrines by heretics in recent memory. Lastly, it's important to note some points about Adu's writings. with his martyrology seeming to take precedence. He composed his other works after becoming a bishop, but he undertook the martyrology before his episcopate. This is inferred from the fact that after spending 5 years in Rome, he went to Ravenna, where he copied a booklet provided by a religious brother to describe the passions of the holy martyrs, the Martyrology, which some wrongly attribute to Adu of Trier. It was first published in print by Jacob Mosander the Carthusian, and later by Heribert Rosewide, who found Adu's name prefixed in the Everybody manuscript, stating, Adu, Archbishop of Vienne, compiled it as an epitome, beginning with the feasts of the apostles, their disciples, or their successors, and ending with a prayer composed in verse by Adu himself. Both editors placed the names of certain saints, which they believed were added by others, into an appendix. Whether this was rightly done we shall soon see. In many handwritten copies of this martyrology that I have seen, the name of Adu does not appear. This is likely because the letter bearing Adu's name is not at the beginning of the martyrology itself, but rather at the beginning of the old Roman martyrology, which Adu used in creating his own, and which is missing in many manuscript codices. Because of this, it was omitted by the transcribers of Adu's martyrology. However, its author reveals himself enough in many places of his martyrology. For example, he talks about the translation of the body of St. Augustine, a doctor of the Church, to Pavia in the year 822 by Liutprand, king of the Lombards, and says it happened recently on August 28. Then, on September 14, he mentions the translation of the relics of St. Cyprian from Africa to France during the reign of Charlemagne, and then to Arles and Lyon by Bishop Lidrad. The added part about the translation to Compiègne by Charles the Bald seems to have been inserted after Adu's death, and does not appear in our 600-year-old handwritten copy. Later, when discussing the institution of the Feast of All Saints on November 1, he says, but in France, at the suggestion of the holy memory of Pope Gregory, the most pious Emperor Louis, with the consent of all the bishops of his kingdom and empire, decreed that the Feast of All Saints should be celebrated annually and perpetually on the aforementioned day. Furthermore, in our manuscript, the dedication of the Church of the Celiensian Monastery in the year 850 is described accurately on October 16, in the same way as it was related above for the year 873, where we discuss the translation of Saint Frodebert, abbot. The reason I am inclined to believe that these details were not added by an interpolator is that a person from a later time would not have known such precise details. It seems the anonymous author who composed the book about the life of Saint Frodebert, abbot of Celiensian, published in the 2nd century, was unaware of them. From these facts, it can be inferred that this martyrologist lived during the reign of Charles the Bald. The place where he frequently stayed suggests Burgundy, as he praises its native saints more diligently than others. He seems particularly focused on documenting matters related to the city of Auxerre and the monastery of Saint Germain. From this, I sometimes inferred that he might have been a student of that monastery. In our manuscript, the dedications of each of its churches, altars and crypts are mentioned. The occasion of Saint Germain, bishop of that city, is noted everywhere, especially on July 12, where the author, speaking of Saint Savinus, says, he was, he says, one of the disciples of the great Father Germain, and on August 5, speaking of Saint Cassianus, he says, when Saint Germain the bishop came to his tomb, amazingly, after praying as usual, he called him from the grave and said to him, what are you doing here, brother Cassianus? Finally, besides other festivals of Saint Germain, he mentions his vigil on September 30. All these details suggest that the man once lived not far from Auxerre. I know that Mosander and Rosewide either did not read these and many other things in the manuscripts they used, or rejected them as appendices, as if they had been inserted by others, and certainly some were added by more recent people in our manuscript, such as the commemoration of Saint Maelus the abbot on May 11, and the reception of the body of Saint Ragnobert the bishop of Bayeux on August 16, at the monastery of Verzy, and a few others. But those things that relate to Auxerre and the monastery of Saint Germain, I believe, were written by the primary author, because in several copies of his martyrology that I have read, both complete and abbreviated, they are all referred to in the same way. The same judgment should be applied to almost all the names that Mosander and Rosewide relegated. The various parts missing in different manuscript copies of this martyrology stem from two main reasons. First, when this martyrology was read during divine offices by different churches, some would shorten it, while others removed certain saints unknown to their region or church. Second, the author himself added to his martyrology multiple times, including more saints who were not there initially. As a result, those who copied the primary version have fewer entries compared to those who used secondary versions. For instance, the missing commemoration of Saints Florentinus and Hilarius in Rosewide's Adu is referenced in Adu's martyrology by Peter de Natalibus in Book 8, Chapter 124. It is evident that Adu is the author of this martyrology, both from the letter placed before the old martyrology he used, and from Notker's martyrology on the 10th day before June, where he explains why Adu in his own work makes no mention of Saint Desiderius, though he was Archbishop of Vienne and a martyr. Indeed, his commemoration does not exist in the common version of Adon's Martyrology, which Peter de Natalibus frequently praises under Adon's name. From this, we understand that this martyrology was written by Adon before his episcopate, and that later, when reviewing his work, he omitted Saints Desiderius, Bishop of Vienne, and Theuderic, abbot in the same city. He was an old man when he added the prayer to this work, which begins with these verses in rosewhite. Christ, I pray you grant forgiveness to your slow disciple. I am slow, but no one comes to you late. Long years of past error held us. Let this punishment suffice for my merits, I pray. Life is short, and age leans towards death. Now as an old man I cannot sin. I do not wish to be yours. Yet you may doubt whether these verses are Adon's, as they are attributed to Florus in Volume 1 of the Old Analects on page 407. But since the title space is blank in the Batavian manuscript, we cannot take these verses away from Adon. Here is what came to mind about the aforementioned martyrology: the commemoration of St. Maurice the Abbot, St. Scholastica, and almost all other saints, whom Mosander and Roswitus removed, needs to be restored in it. Moreover, whether that old martyrology which Adon used was Roman is examined in the preface of this volume. Adon also recorded a summary of past times from the beginning of the world up to the reigns of the emperors Lothair, Louis and Charles, with as much brevity as possible, as he himself states in his Chronicle. The latter part of this Chronicle, in the published version, is by another author, from the point, if my guess does not deceive me, where it deals with the division of the kingdom that King Louis of the Noricans made among his sons. Although the Lithuanian manuscript, which surpasses 500 years, ends in the same way as the published books, that is, in the year 879. He also polished the Acts of Saint Desiderius, Bishop of Vienne, for the benefit of his fellow Viennese, as attested by the preface of Adon, Bishop of the Church of Vienne, in the year of the Lord's Incarnation 870, in the third indiction, when the Passion of Saint Desiderius the bishop was directed to the same church, which contains these words: I, Adon, a sinner and humble bishop of the Church of Vienne, to the dearest brothers and sons of the same church, I have undertaken to recount and commit to writing the life and martyrdom of your most blessed Father Desiderius, as it is commended in ancient writings, so that I might inflame you even more to the love of eternal life through his incentives and efforts. This life was first published in print by Henry Canisius in the 6th volume of Ancient Readings, at the end of which is added a list by Ison, a monk of St. Gall. This passion was sent to us brothers in the monastery of St. Gall, under Abbot Grimald, who serve God. It was sent by Archbishop Adon, along with the relics of Saint Desiderius and other saints, as well as their acts and passions described below. This was done in the mentioned year by trustworthy messengers, primarily through Berald the priest, as testified by Notcar in his Martyrology on the 10th day before the calends of June, where he talks about Saint Desiderius. He says, because the Venerable Father Adon, the bishop of our time, present and well known to all, decided it was unnecessary to say more about him. We, according to the writing which the same apostolic man sent in the year of the Lord's Incarnation 870, in the third indiction, through the holy man Berald, a priest native to those places but now serving Christ in the castle of Zurich, with the relics of the holy martyr Desiderius and other saints, and their acts and passions, to us in the monastery of St. Gall, touching briefly on a few things to inform those unfamiliar with these matters. Both testimonies mention the acts and passions or struggles of the saints, which Adon gave as a gift to the monks of St. Gall written by hand. These words confirm that the martyrology was composed by Adon himself. This is clearly stated in Notcar's testimony, explaining why Adon did not mention Desiderius, the bishop of Vienne, in his martyrology. He says, because the Venerable Father Adon, present and well known to all, decided it was unnecessary to say more about him. It has been observed that Desiderius's mention was omitted in both published and handwritten copies of Adon's martyrology. Furthermore, the same holy bishop wrote a book about the life of Saint Theuderic, the abbot of Vienne, and dedicated it to the monks of his monastery with this prologue: Adon, Bishop of Vienne, to the brothers in the monastery of Saint Theuderic, eternal salvation in the Lord Jesus Christ. I've decided to share with you the life of your father, the blessed Theuderic, through these writings. My hope is that his example will inspire you to cherish eternal life. This account was published in the appendix of the 1st century. Before we delve into Adon, a bishop of Vienne from the 9th century, we should consider a few points. Claudius Stephanosius provided me with an index from a Viennese manuscript, noting it was written by order of Bishop Berno in 1239. Additionally, you can find another index of 9th and 10th century bishops in Volume 1 of the Analecta. All these indices should be compared with the manuscript calendar of Vienne. Berno's chronicler describes Ursus and his successors as follows. Saint Ursus, a good and simple man, burdened with age, chose a coadjutor to act in his place. He was buried in the church of St. Stephen on April 22. Saint Ultraja, a Christian from a Jewish background of the tribe of Benjamin, was the coadjutor and successor of Bishop Ursus. He was very dear to Charlemagne and passed away on March 15. He was buried alongside his predecessor in the Church of St. Stephen. The common indices and the manuscript calendar of the Church of Vienne mention him with these words: Commemoration of Ultraja, Bishop of Vienne, who, during the time of Emperor Charlemagne, while the elderly Ursus was still alive and being a man of the tribe of Benjamin, took up the bishopric of Vienne. During his time under the pious Emperor Charlemagne, the Church of Vienne received part of its properties. He governed the church for 11 years and was buried in the Church of St. Severus, where his predecessor Ursus also lies buried. Berno's chronicler, the manuscript calendar, and even John of Bosco place Wulfurus before Ursus, also known as Ursian. Ursus is known to have attended the Council of Frankfurt in the year 794 according to Canon 8, and he is distinguished from Ultraja. Aronadu, who is more trustworthy, places Wulfurius, a Bavarian by birth, before Urso, saying Wulfurius had two names and was called Ultrea by his family. Saint Bernard succeeded Ultra, or Wulfarius, around the year 810 and died in 842, as proved in his life in the previous volume. Therefore Bernard's chronographer should be corrected, as he placed Bernard's ordination in 817, and his death in 862. Saint Agelmar obtained confirmation of the foundation of the Romanes monastery, founded by Saint Bernard, from Emperor Lothair, says the chronographer. According to the aforementioned, he died on the day before the Nones of July in the year 800, not 800 as the chronographer mistakenly wrote, and was solemnly buried at the feet of Namat in the Church of St. Peter. Saint Adu passed away on the 17th day before the calends of January in the year 873, not in 876 as in the Analects, or in 879, according to the chronographer. After Adu, the clergy and people elected Athranus as Archbishop of Vienne. Bishop Bernarius of Grenoble attended his consecration, according to the Analects. Saint Athranus, says the chronographer, lies in the Church of St. Peter, having died on September 16, 888. After Athranus, Barnoinus was elected and consecrated. He died in the year of the Lord's Incarnation 899, in the 11th indiction, according to the Analects, where an error crept into the year of the Incarnation, as I later discovered from the autograph. Indeed, in the same year of the Incarnation 899, in the 11th indiction, on the 5th day before the calends of February, on a Sunday, Ragenfridus was consecrated as Archbishop, and Isaac, Bishop of the Holy Church of Grenoble, attended his consecration, during the time of King Louis, son of Boso. Therefore, the chronographer should be corrected again, as he places Barnoinus' death in 901, and writes that he attended the council held in Vienne by the legate of the Apostolic See in 892. These details about the bishops of Vienne and about Adu should be noted.